Hello, this is Cate Stillman with yogahealer.com, and I have the pleasure of being here today with Nadya and Andreeva with spinach and yoga.com. And we thought that we, as modern day yoginis and Ayurvedic health coaches, Ayurvedic practitioners, we thought we'd just take a minute and talk about what yoga students really have to gain from a deep dive into Ayurveda. And this is something that I find this really interesting because I think being a practitioner I think I've been a practitioner for 12 years now and been studying Ayurveda for 15 plus 16 plus years now. I'm so deeply embedded in it. Like my yoga is so deeply embedded in it. It's hard to remember back to just doing yoga before I really learned Ayurveda.
Which one came first to you, yoga or Ayurveda?
Uh, it was easier for me to find a yoga teacher, but I was reading Ayurveda books from the beginning. So I didn't find a teacher until 2 years into my practice. So I think
Okay.
now it's easier to find Ayurvedic people, but back in the
Yeah.
day it was pretty tricky. So I was reading about it, and I was so drawn into it, but I didn't have a living teacher. So then my yoga was progressing more rapidly than my understanding of the sister science of Ayurveda.
Yeah.
So yeah, what's in your experience? Yeah, I'd love to hear. Like, what do you sense that yoga students could get that they just don't really know? They just don't know they can get from doing a deep dive into Ayurveda.
Yeah. So for me, it was kind of a opposite experience. I was practicing yoga on a daily basis since I was 12 because my dad was practicing on a daily basis. But I haven't started using Ayurveda probably until 4 or 5 years ago. It didn't become a part of my daily life until my body kind of forced me to make it a part of my daily life. And it started with meeting Dr. Lad in person, and he looked at my pulse and he was like, "What's wrong with you? Like,
Really?
why is your vata so out of balance, and why are you drinking only juices with no food every other day?" And that made me realize, okay, well, some things that work for everyone, for some people, doesn't mean that they're going to work for everyone. And it also made me realize that yoga practice is the same way as food. Group classes and just doing the same thing as everyone else is doing is not necessarily going to be the best for my body.
Yeah.
And that's when really started exploring yoga and Ayurveda connection and really adapting my yoga routine on a daily basis to make it extremely balancing for myself. So I knew what poses to do depending on what qualities were missing or were too high in my body. So it took the understanding of my body and my needs to a completely new level. And now, the same as you, I can't imagine not using Ayurveda when I do my daily practice.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's and I really think that's what we become is like I love this phrase that Dr. John Juilliard uses about like you get the driver's manual to your vehicle. Like
Yeah.
so there's all these people walking around there or driving around these vehicles and they don't have the manual for it. So when it breaks down, they don't know how to fix it, right? Or when things get a little bit, when it starts making that funny sound or certain feeling something funny over here, you don't know what to do. And I think as yoga students, we're going, when we're talking about yoga students, when I'm talking about yoga students, I'm talking about like typical Western yoga student, the people that are on my list. I'm sure the people that are on your list, like people we're talking to right now, they grew up with standard American diet or fairly standard Westernized diet. There's still probably quite a bit of heavier foods in the diet, heavier than fruits and vegetables. They're exclusively fruits and vegetables, right? So a lot more meat, a lot more dairy, a lot more grains, and then it's a fairly acidic diet usually too, with more caffeine, alcohol, maybe even marijuana, nicotine, substances that acidify the body pretty quickly. So it's even hard to get perspective of how it's possible to feel without the Ayurvedic side that really coaches us through those shifts that take time and take time in our families, right? Because it's like you don't live in a little, or I don't live in a little bubble anyways. I'm always
Yeah.
influenced by like my husband, my child, my friends. Friends come into town to visit, and
Yeah. But I also feel like it helps people knowing an Ayurveda. When people are practicing yoga, it just helps them to take that level of self-care to a completely new level.
yeah,
It just helps them to understand that it's a matter of finding that perfect balance, or at least a balance where they feel good. It's never going to be perfect. Um, but something that works for them, and using not only yoga, but then also using other tools, because Ayurveda
yeah,
covers so many different aspects from your daily routine to the food, and you just add in more and more things. So more actions throughout the day, including yoga, become aligned towards the place where you want to be in terms of how you feel.
yeah,
So there's more aspects of the daily living that bring you to that ideal perfect state where you want to be.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And what I'm hearing you saying as well is like in that you're getting more skills, like more skills for self care. Like now, oh, I know how to take care of my sense organs so that as I age, as I get older, I'm going to have more tools so that I mean, these are things that I feel like a lot of people don't think about until it's sort of too late, until you're like, I'm losing my hearing, I'm losing my
Yeah.
seeing, I'm losing my sense of smell, I'm losing my sense of taste, I'm losing my, like, the sensuality
Ability.
of touch. Like, yeah, exactly. I'm losing my senses. And this is something that I think when we study yoga and we get into our body, I think that's the first thing that happens with yoga is like the first thing we discover is like, oh, I can breathe. Like I'm a lot, this thing's alive, right? And like, oh my God, it
Yeah.
moves. We could start to move in so many different ways than we could before. We're more coordinated and we're more integrated. And then the next thing that I think naturally happens is like how can we keep this thing like going and thriving and hitting new levels of that coordination and of that integration and in these new sort of levels of vibrant health. And then I think the question naturally comes like, well, what does aging look like on this evolutionary health trajectory? Because all of a sudden aging looks really different than what everybody else seems to be doing, which is like getting kind of like fat and old and losing their senses and falling apart.
Yeah, and I feel like you're right. A lot of people are very afraid of aging. They think that certain things just come and they're to be expected and they're to be accepted.
Yeah.
And Ayurveda helps to take certain things back. It helps you to feel a lot more balanced and actually maybe even better when you're 40 or 50 than
Right.
what you did when you were 30.
Yeah.
And that's very, very empowering, um, because you know that you kind of have to take responsibility for how you feel.
Yeah.
And it's not something that a lot of people want to do, but I feel like as yogis, we're more likely to take that responsibility on and say, okay, well, maybe I do need to take care of the way my body ages and feels on a day-to-day basis. And if it doesn't feel the way I want it to feel, maybe in a way it's my fault.
Ooh, taking responsibility. Yeah, right? Right? Instead of like, who can I blame? Who can I blame for this? I can blame my ancestors for the gene they passed down, right? There's a lot of, I really hear what you're saying that there is this opportunity really, and it is a paradigm shift for at least standard westernized culture of yogis sort of on this edge of saying like, wow, like how can I take responsibility for the way that I'm going to age. I was having this conversation with with Desiree Ramba, who's a famous yogini. She travels and teaches yoga around the world. Yeah. And, she was saying, like, I don't want to be a burden to my daughter. And I thought, my goodness, like, that seems obvious. I've never heard someone else say it. And I'm sure someone else has said it. But it's not common in thought of, like, I don't want to burden the next generation because I didn't take care of myself. Because I didn't do, and it's not saying that like, we're burdening each other, but there's this ability to really, like what you're saying, like take responsibility for there's things that we can do now to change the way that we're going to age. And as we do a deeper dive in Ayurveda, we do learn that. We learn how to take care of our senses. We learn how to take care of the 7 layers of tissue in our body. We learn the very subtle signs of when there's imbalances so that they don't go deeper before they become, qualitative changes in our tissue.
Yeah, and we also get that amazing perspective in terms of that everything in our surrounding affects the way we feel. So it's not just the movement, it's not just the food, but it's also the people, the sounds, the way things look, the sweater that you're wearing, the blanket that you have on, and it just makes everything a lot more integrated. So everything is a lot more aligned.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that yoga and Ayurveda can give to a student, which is priceless.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, it's like we can wake up to the minutia of our choices and how they come together to become our experience, really, of how we feel and what we're able to do. Well, good. This has been fun. Any final thoughts on what yoga students can get out of a deep dive in Ayurveda? I think we've covered a lot. I mean,
Yeah, I think it is all about a dive. I think it's just about, actually, I think it's about step-by-step process. You learn slowly, you integrate one thing at a time, see if it makes a difference, see if it works for you, and then maybe you go for another one.
yeah,
So it's a step-by-step process.
yeah, yeah. It's great. It's like yoga. It's like you can't get to that level 3 pose on your first class, or if you do, you're going to get hurt, and you're not going to really experience like the energy that's possible because we have to learn how to breathe and move and yeah, exactly. So I just want to say for anyone who wants to take a deep dive and go step by step deeper into Ayurveda, I have a free Ayurveda training. If you go to yogahealer.com, you'll see there's a box there, and you just put your name and email in, and then I start sending you emails so that you can get access to some free ebooks and webinars and audios that I've created for you to help the typical yoga student or yoga teacher take the next step in Ayurveda. And then I also do offer for the person who really wants to go more seriously into owning your vehicle, like owning your form. There's the Living Ayurveda course that happens once a year. It starts the end of September every year, and it's a 9-month online course with live interaction. We have 4 calls that are live a month and a few webinars every month that really will bring you through an inner tour of who you are. So thanks, Nadya. Thanks so much for the conversation.
Thank you, Kate. And I do highly recommend Kate's courses. I've taken a course with her, and I loved it. So you guys, if you have time, check it out.
Thanks so much.